The case of Nancy Guthrie has entered a grueling and silent phase that is testing the patience of the community and the credibility of the Pima County Sheriff's Department. We are now more than 70 days into the disappearance, and the flow of verified information has slowed to a crawl. The biggest question right now is whether the investigation has stalled or if authorities are intentionally withholding a breakthrough. And the document that proves the complexity of this delay is the current forensic testing schedule. Investigators have confirmed that DNA evidence, including specific hair samples recovered from the scene, is currently being processed across multiple labs. This isn't just a routine check. The involvement of both a Florida-based private lab and the FBI's crime lab proves that the evidence is either highly degraded or contains complex mixtures that require the most advanced sequencing technology available in the country. We aren't just looking at a missing person case. We are looking at a massive failure in public communication that has created a vacuum now filled by panic and misinformation. Recently, a misleading social media post claiming that Nancy had been located spread like wildfire, causing a wave of false hope and subsequent outrage when it was revealed to be a different individual with the same name. This confusion happened because the sheriff's department has been reactive rather than proactive. In a case with this much public sensitivity, even a minor misstep in communication is amplified. We are seeing a growing frustration with leadership, as officials like Chris Nanos have provided almost no substantial updates since March. This silence has led many to believe that the crime scene was reopened too early, potentially compromising the very evidence that labs are now struggling to analyze. The reality of forensic science in 2026 is that it is often a slow, methodical process that does not match the speed of a 24-hour news cycle. While the public wants answers today, the labs are dealing with the DNA mixture problem. When a crime scene involves multiple individuals, as we suspect in this coordinated operation, the biological samples are often mixed. Separating the DNA of a victim from that of a perpetrator, especially when dealing with hair shafts that may not have a root, requires a process called mitochondrial DNA sequencing. This is likely why the evidence has been sent to specialized labs in Florida. These facilities use next-generation sequencing to pull a profile from the smallest fragments of biological material. If a suspect left even a single hair behind without a follicle, modern science can still track them, but it takes months, not days, to verify those results to a legal standard. This slow information phase is a breeding ground for distrust. The Pima County Sheriff's Department is currently facing a crisis of confidence because they have failed to manage the emotional weight of this case. When a community feels ignored, they begin to question every move the police made in the first 48 hours. The criticism regarding the early reopening of Nancy's home is not just social media chatter. It is a legitimate concern among forensic experts. If the perimeter was not maintained long enough for a secondary and tertiary sweep for trace evidence, the clean profile the FBI needs might have been trampled or contaminated by family members or investigators returning to the site too soon. The dual-track testing, using both a private lab and the FBI, is a strategic move, but it is one that remains poorly explained to the public. Typically, a private lab in Florida is used for rapid or specialized genealogical testing, while the FBI lab handles the formal evidence that will be presented in a federal court. This suggests that the authorities may already have a person of interest and are trying to build a genealogical bridge to identify them. However, without a proactive communication strategy, this looks like a department that is simply waiting for a miracle. The high public sensitivity around Nancy's disappearance means that every day of silence is perceived as a day of failure. We must also look at the impact of the Nancy has been located confusion. This incident highlights the information vacuum that exists when official channels go dark. When the authorities refuse to provide a no-change update, the community turns to unverified sources. This creates a cycle of trauma for the family and the public, where false hope is followed by a crushing reality. The sheriff's office has been accused of being defensive rather than transparent, which only deepens the suspicion that the investigation was mishandled in its infancy. The hair evidence remains the most promising, open loop, in the current investigation. Unlike blood, which can be cleaned, or fingerprints, which can be avoided with gloves, humans shed hundreds of hairs every day. If the kidnapping team spent any significant amount of time inside the residence during the snatch phase, They left biological signatures behind. The fact that the testing is ongoing after 70 days suggests that the labs have found something non-victim and are currently working to ensure the profile is strong enough for a CODIS upload. As we move forward, the focus must remain on the technical reality of the labs versus the tactical failure of the leadership. We are in a holding pattern where science is the only thing moving forward, while the public's relationship with the sheriff's department continues to deteriorate. The investigation is at a tipping point. If the DNA results come back with a hit, the strategic silence will be justified. If they come back inconclusive, the decision to reopen the crime scene early and the lack of communication will become the defining legacy of this case. The community isn't just looking for Nancy, they are looking for accountability. They want to know why the communication strategy is so reactive and why the department seems to be struggling to keep up with the digital and forensic demands of a modern abduction. The case is a reminder that in the absence of truth, rumor becomes the dominant currency. The Pima County Sheriff's Department needs to realize that transparency isn't just about sharing clues. It's about maintaining the public's trust so that when an arrest is finally made, the community is standing behind them rather than questioning their every move. The next few weeks will be critical as the results from the Florida and FBI labs are expected to be cross-referenced. This is the moment where the slow phase of the investigation must produce a result. Every hair, every mixed DNA sample, and every digital log from the surrounding area is a silent witness that is currently being interrogated by scientists. The silence from the authorities may be frustrating, but the science is speaking, and eventually, the data will provide the clarity that the press releases have failed to deliver. The public deserves a timeline that reflects the reality of the forensic effort. If the DNA is complex, the department should explain why. If the labs are working in parallel, the community should understand the purpose of that duplication. By treating the public as a partner rather than an obstacle, the investigators can mitigate the frustration and focus on what matters most: finding Nancy and identifying the team that took her. Until then, we remain in this high-sensitivity period where every word, or lack thereof, carries the weight of a life hanging in the balance. The technical complexity of DNA deconvolution is the likely culprit for the current delay. When multiple people's genetic material is found on a single item, like a door handle or a piece of clothing, the software must work through millions of combinations to separate the strands. This is a massive computational task. It is not like a television show where a name pops up on a screen in seconds. It is a process of elimination that requires exemplars from everyone who had legal access to the house. If the department was slow in collecting those elimination samples from family, friends, and neighbors, it pushed the entire timeline back by weeks. This brings us back to the leadership failure. A proactive department would have had all elimination samples at the lab within the first 10 days. If they are only now realizing they need more samples to clean the DNA profiles, it points to a fundamental lack of foresight in the early stages of the investigation. The community's growing criticism is grounded in this perception of a reactive, catch-up style of policing. In a coordinated abduction, you cannot afford to be behind the curve. The misinformation on social media is a symptom of this larger problem. When the official voice of the investigation is silent, the loudest voice wins, regardless of whether it is telling the truth. The panic caused by the Nancy Found post was a direct result of people being desperate for any news at all. It showed how much emotional capital the community has invested in this woman's safety, and how easily that capital can be manipulated by a lack of official clarity. We are watching a case where the forensics are cutting edge, but the management is old school. The hair evidence, the mitochondrial DNA, and the parallel lab testing are all 21st century tools. However, the communication strategy and the crime scene management reflect a department that was perhaps not prepared for a crime of this sophistication. As we wait for the labs to finish their work, the pressure on Sheriff Chris Nanos will only increase. The slow information phase cannot last forever. Eventually, the science will provide an answer, and the department will have to answer for the way it handled the silence. The focus must now shift to the results of the hair analysis. In many recent cold cases, it was the rootless hair DNA that finally broke the mystery. If the Florida lab can provide a mitochondrial match, it will narrow the suspect pool to a specific maternal line. This would give investigators a starting point to look at specific families or groups that may have had a motive. It is a slow, grueling process, but it is the most likely path to a resolution in a case where the perpetrators were careful enough to avoid leaving footprints or high-quality surveillance footage. In conclusion, the Nancy Guthrie case is currently a battle between forensic progress and public perception. The DNA is the key, the hair is the lead, and the labs are the battlefield. While the department stays silent, the evidence is being processed grain by grain, hair by hair. We are looking for that one clean profile that will link the house, the CRV, and the coordinated team. The frustration is real, the sensitivity is high, and the stakes could not be greater. We will continue to wait for the science to speak, even if the authorities won't. The importance of the hair evidence cannot be overstated. Hair is one of the most common forms of trace evidence found at crime scenes, but for years, it was only useful if the root was attached. Today, with massively parallel sequencing, we can look at the DNA inside the hair shaft itself. This DNA is more limited, but it is incredibly durable. It can survive for years, and can be used to exclude millions of people from a suspect list. If the labs are working in parallel, it is likely that one is focusing on this mitochondrial DNA, while the FBI focuses on any potential nuclear DNA found elsewhere. This multi-lab approach is expensive and time-consuming, but it shows that the investigators realize the gravity of the case. They are not leaving it to a single point of failure. If the Florida lab finds a lead that the FBI missed, or vice versa, it provides a check and balance that is vital for a case that will likely end up in a high-stakes trial. The community needs to see this as a sign of thoroughness, even if the department isn't explaining it well. As we look at the 70-day mark, we have to recognize that the investigation is now in a war of attrition. The perpetrators are waiting for the public to lose interest. The police are waiting for the labs to provide a name. The community is waiting for leadership to show a sign of life. In this environment, the truth is the only thing that can break the stalemate. Whether that truth comes from a digital log or a single strand of hair, it is coming. The question is whether the Pima County Sheriff's Department will be ready to act on it when it arrives, or if the leadership vacuum has already done too much damage to the case. We must remain vigilant. The slow information phase is not an excuse for inactivity. Every day that passes without an update is a day that the perpetrators feel more comfortable. The pressure must remain on the authorities to provide a transparent account of the forensic progress. We are not asking for details that would compromise the case. We are asking for a demonstration of competence and a commitment to the community Nancy belongs to. The hair evidence, the complex DNA mixtures, the parallel lab work, these are the components of a modern mystery. But at the heart of it is a human being who vanished. The technical details are important, but they are all secondary to the goal of bringing Nancy home. As we move into the next phase of this investigation, we will keep the focus on the science and the accountability of those tasked with using it. The silence will not last forever, and the evidence will not be denied. The forensic path forward is clear. The deconvolution of the mixed DNA samples will eventually reveal the profiles of those present in the home. The hair analysis will provide a maternal link to the suspects. The digital extraction of the CRV will provide the timeline. When these three pillars of evidence are combined, the authorities will have more than just a suspicion. They will have a map of the crime. The public's frustration is the natural result of being left in the dark, but the light is being generated in the labs, one test at a time. We will continue to track the progress of the Florida and FBI lab reports. We will continue to question the communication strategy of Sheriff Chris Nanos. And we will continue to demand that the sensitivity of this case be met with a level of professionalism that honors the victim. The story of Nancy Guthrie is far from over. It is simply moving at the speed of science, which is often a slow and silent journey toward justice. As we look at the final details of Point 10, the concern over early crime scene handling, we have to realize that forensics is a game of what if. What if a single hair was missed because the scene was reopened? What if a footprint was destroyed? These are the questions that haunt investigators in the years to come. But even with those risks, the active dripping blood and the deep electronic extraction provide a foundation that is hard to shake. The team that took Nancy was professional, but no one is perfect. They left something behind. Whether it was a digital footprint in the CRV or a biological footprint in a hair shaft, the forensic net is being cast. It is only a matter of time before it starts to pull in the truth. The slow phase is not a dead phase. It is the most critical time for the scientists who are currently the only people talking to the evidence. We must trust the process of the labs while continuing to challenge the process of the department. Nancy Guthrie's case is a testament to the fact that in 2026, you cannot simply vanish. You leave a trail. It might be a trail of data, or a trail of DNA, but it is a trail nonetheless. And we are going to follow that trail until it leads to an answer.